All right, good morning, fellow listeners. Today we have a very, very awesome podcast for you. Dr. Pran, how are you, my friend?
Very good, guys. How are you both?
We're feeling pretty good, man. A little bit nervous to talk to you. You know, we know you're a man of knowledge, and we're so grateful to have you on. And we've been following your stuff quite a while, and it actually took some courage to even message you and just say, "Come on, let's get you on the podcast." And I know you're a busy man, so we really appreciate you coming on.
It's an absolute pleasure to chat with you guys today. I'm still mystified that people are kind of interested in what I've got to say, but very, very blessed to have such a good community kind of behind the message that I'm trying to promote. And thrilled to speak to both of you today.
Man, it's just refreshing to see someone in the medical field that looks the part. And I think that's the big thing that people are attracted to your page and your posts and things like that, is that you look healthy, and that's rare. That's rare these days, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a rare trait in society in general, right? But we've kind of become accustomed to this new normal, and it's really, I mean, it's worrying times, and I'm sure we'll kind of touch on all of that aspects. But I appreciate it. I'm feeling okay for a 40-year-old bloke, and and it's interesting. People kind of assume that strength and muscle drops with age, but the reality is you can build muscle at any age. Well, naturally as well. Yeah, which is good.
That's what I love, because we have mentors that live by the same principles, and they're examples. You know what I mean? So I love it when I see an example. It's like, all right, what's that person doing? Because it's working. You know what I mean? They don't have skin issues. They don't have bloating. They don't have atrophy, and they're you know, one of our mentors, Paul, he just turned 60 the other day, and he goes, I can run as good as I could in high school, and I lift more than a lot of my professional athletes, and I'm not in pain. And it's just someone that's lived by good organic food, plenty of sleep, just the basics, the primal basics, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. I think, it's dangerous territory when people seek acceptance in a new norm. I think and this is why I'm so big on the concept of history. We've got to look back at history and to see that. I mean, you just have to look at an old photograph to know that a lot of older people had really good muscle retention, even into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's just we've become accustomed to a different perspective, sadly.
For sure. Do you think that in the 1953, when herbicides, pesticides and stuff like that really started getting introduced, do you think that's when it kind of went bad, or do you think it was before then?
I think it's a culmination of things, guys. I think the introduction of chemical manipulation of our food did start things, like, just to simplify it from my perspective, that we often hear people talk of dysbiosis of the gut being associated with obesity. So you get a lot of research in this field saying, well, having a bad gut microbiome will give you obesity. But I don't think that's kind of the case. I think that's correlation, not causation, whereby you've got things like pesticides, which I'm sure affect our gut microbiome. We know that glyphosate affects the gut microbiome, but then it's everything else that kind of goes with it as well. So I think it's a multitude of factors that lead to this concept of being metabolically unhealthy. I don't think it's as simple as it's one thing, but I'm sure it has a huge role to play on it.
Yeah, for sure. I just, like you said with the photos, like you look back to the early 1900s, like our grandpa and things like that, and you see a lot less, obese people back then, and it's crazy how it's become the new norm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And now it's shifting further still, where we're starting to see emerging obesity and issues in children. So that's kind of becoming the new norm for us now, which I think is a real tragedy, because if you think of obesity fundamentally as a type of toxicity, these kids have then got exposure to this toxicity from a very, very early stages of their life. So, one of the examples that I give to people is, if you look at the lifetime exposure to obesity, most people kind of hit their 30s and start putting on weight then. But if you're a kid and you've been exposed to obesity from age 1 to 5 or whatever it is, your lifetime exposure to obesity is quite significant. So by the time they've hit 30, they've had 30 years of obesity, that their rates of childhood of early onset cancers are really going to go through the roof, and I think we're going to start seeing an epidemic of that in the next decade.
Man, and for addressing that, I've seen your post, and it really resonates with me, and it makes sense in the light of evolution. Is the protein leverage hypothesis, which is I've seen you. It just makes so much sense, and it's what, instead of calories in, calories out. Like we put a lot of our clients on like a fungal cleanse, and it's probably about, what do you reckon? Over 50% of people are dropping some form of worm. I had one guy drop a foot long Ascaris roundworm the other day, like this week. So, but whether they have that or not, really, they're just eating a lot more protein. They feel a lot more better by the end of it, purely because they're, with this cleanse, they can't have so much sugar in that. So they're forced to really eat more protein and meat without them thinking about it. You know what I mean?
It's really interesting. Like, it's super interesting that you say that, because you see a lot of fitness influencers in this space, talking about you can eat anything and drop weight, and it's really interesting. The caveat to all their statements is, but you've got to maximize protein. So really, I find that really quite interesting. I think the trick really is keeping the protein levels high. It doesn't really matter where your energy levels come from, energy source comes from, whether it's fat or carbohydrate. But I personally think, it's important to maximize as much fat as possible, because a lot of protein will convert to glycogen store anyway. But it's critical to keep protein high. I mean, it's just such a no-brainer. Very difficult to do that, though, because you've got modern guidelines and modern eating kind of patterns saying, well, do a low protein diet. So people just get really confused in the space. So it's nice to have guys like yourself kind of just showing people how to do it. And we're probably the only species that has kind of lost touch with how to even eat properly. Most animals will do it instinctively. We don't, because we're burdened by such a predatory sort of food environment with a lot of these companies and the eating guidelines, which kind of tell people to eat in a way which I don't think is conducive to good health.
Yeah, like with eating. So what because I don't like getting I don't get into calories at all, but what I like to teach my clients is just, and this is what I do, is just have lots of different proteins, different organic meats, different colored vegetables, whatever, when you're at the shop, stands out to you. And then when I open the fridge, I look at it and I let my intuition, like, all right, I feel like lamb with that, chicken with that. And I don't get over it. And I wonder, because some people may eat the same meat every day, just eat chicken every day. And that doesn't even make sense in nature. Like, you can type in Manhunt on YouTube, which is a series of people, just a guy following tribes around hunting. And I've noticed they always choose a different animal every day. Like, these tribes generally aren't going for the same animal today. They choose another animal tomorrow, because intuitively, the same way when I eat chicken tonight, I don't feel like chicken tomorrow. Do you know if there's anything behind that with rotating proteins and
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I think, like, one of the things we've got to look at, and I mention it a lot, is this concept of nutrient density. And we forget sometimes that amino acids are actually fundamentally a nutrient. We think of vitamins and minerals as nutrients, but amino acids are nutrients as well, right? And obviously there's different types of fats in our food system. So these are all nutrients. And I think every animal sourced food, every vegetable and plant, they've all just got different profiles of these amino acids, minerals, and vitamins. And I think our body knows. I think there is an intuition to the way we eat, but people don't pay attention to that intuition anymore. And this is the pity of it all. And this is why you get a lot of disordered eating. I think people keep their protein low and then just end up craving this really high energy food. Whereas it's interesting, if you up the protein, people just become more intuitive about the way they eat. They eat when they're hungry, which is how any animal will do it. I mean, you see a dog, for instance, it'll never overeat. If you give it the right foods, meat, for instance, the foods that they crave the most, they will never overeat. They will leave it. And this is what humans will do. Give them enough meat, give them enough fish, give them foods like eggs. They won't overeat that. It's impossible to overeat it.
Yeah, we do that with I got a dog called a Vizsla.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, it's just I just went against like, there's no dry food. He's just been on like raw organ meats and meats from day dot with eggs and eggshells and like
And spring water, yeah.
and spring water. Like he's just the healthiest little
And
thing.
he looks healthy. Yeah, he looks
and
healthy.
he's so like people like he's too skinny. I'm like, this is how he's meant to fucking look.
Yeah,
like.
he eats a lot of meat and he eats a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's interesting. A lot of these domesticated animals end up getting the same diseases that humans get. Cats and dogs and cows. It's such a pity. You know what I mean? And like there's this condition in cows that I've spoken about before, especially ones that are being reared for sort of these high fat type cattle for that Asian market in particular, because they like that. They're given a lot of grain, and these animals overeat the grain. They've got no way to regulate, and they get this condition called grain overload, which is basically excessive gas from excess fermentation in their ruminants.
Wow.
Yeah, and they get bloated and they can die as a result of it.
Shit.
So this is the issue. I think the food environment in which we exist, whether that's a domesticated animal or a human, it's a very artificial food environment. And grains, we forget, only really became a part of our diet 10,000 years ago. And our species is 4 million years old. So I think it's really important to look at everything from an evolutionary perspective, through the lenses of evolution and history, because any living organism, they're best suited to eat a diet that they're adapted for fundamentally,
Yeah, that's cool because we blend the exact same thinking in with our rehab, with physical rehab, because the whole sort of principle that I believe and I was taught is, a push, pull, bend, lunge, squat, and I said twist and gait, right?
Yeah.
That's all movement. You know what I mean? If I throw a ball, there's a lunge, a twist, and a push there. So if I can show someone how to twist efficiently with the right spinal curves, how to lunge with a square pelvis, and how to push with a high rib angle so that it doesn't protrude the shoulder, then that's just the combination. Then I don't have to go this exercise, then they can sort of understand how an exercise is meant to be done without hurting the body. And that's the exact same way I think with food is just and just life full stop really is just like that same quote I always live by is nothing makes sense in biology except in the light of evolution. And I feel like it's when you think like that it's simple. It's like it's like I was taught, if you can have a 4-inch Nike lift instead of wearing your foot or a barefoot shoe, that doesn't make sense. It's like saying the foot's wrong. It's like saying the foot isn't, and the fact that, everyone will heel strike in a Nike, but if you chuck them on barefoot, they're all going to forefoot strike without even teaching them. So that in itself says something to me. It's like, well, are we making it better or are we not? And that's in everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people, it's really interesting. I go to a lot of these meetings and I present to other doctors and so forth, and I tell them this is how they did it from an evolutionary perspective. And the feedback I always get is, well, these people don't live for very long. They got horrible, short, brutish lives. We're better than that. And so we've lost a lot of that humility as well. And I see it a lot amongst my colleagues and doctors, but I'm sure it's the same amongst general population. It's, well, these guys are just dirty and they live brutishly short lives. Reality of the situation is they don't. They have a really tough time coming out of the birth canal, and that's the hazardous journey for them. A lot of them die in childbirth, both the mum and the babies. And as children, they're prone to a lot of infections as the immune system is developing. They're in these environments. I'm talking about hunter-gatherers and probably early humans as well, pre-civilization. So, their death rates from probably 0 to 5 years of age is about 30 to 40%. Wow. So that really skews the average age. Yeah. So the average age, they talk about it being, 45 or something like that. But if you've got 40% of the population dying before the age of 5, it really is going to affect that average or the mean. Most people that make it past the age of 5, make it past teenage years, that they live really good lives, and they live till their 70s and 80s and die with infection. Fundamentally,
the DNA
comes on. How we're supposed to do it.
Yeah. So the strongest DNA survives, hey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's it's a touchy subject, but with this whole COVID thing, being that like the strongest DNA will survive,
Yes.
I've always looked at it as like, I don't think there's an evil bunch of people sitting there creating diseases for the average human to die, but I do think that if we get sick, we should have a strong enough immune system to overcome these kind of things. What's your take on that?
Yeah, listen, I mean, COVID's it's a very touchy subject at the moment. It's top.
I didn't say anything.
No, that's right. No, it's fine. It's interesting, the data that we've seen amongst really young, healthy, fit people, the death rates are very low. But, we have had young, fit, healthy people pass as well. But these are a minority, and I think very, very unlucky as well. But the vast majority of deaths is coming in those that are kind of really quite metabolically unhealthy, with obesity, with diabetes, with comorbidities, the elderly in particular. So it's really interesting to me that metabolic health is playing such a big role in the outcomes with COVID. I think if your metabolic health is problematic, your immune health is going to be problematic as well, because metabolic health ties in strongly with inflammation. And a lot of COVID-related death is not the virus itself; it's an exaggerated response to the actual virus. It's your own body's immune system's cytokine storm that kills you. So my point's always been that a lot of these people that are developing really bad outcomes with COVID are already inflamed, if that makes sense. They've got this chronic inflammatory process happening, and COVID comes along and just pushes them over the edge. Whereas I think if you're metabolically healthy, you're going to really improve your outcomes with it. It's still a nasty virus. I mean, it's not a virus that we'd say is harmless. I see that being thrown around in social media. I think that's a really problematic rhetoric to take on board, and very disrespectful as well, because millions have kind of lost their lives worldwide. But I think the fact that it's having such bad outcomes, it speaks to our general health as society. And I've made the point before, like 88 to 90% of American adults are metabolically unhealthy, right? 90%. Which is a huge number. I don't think Australia is too far off that.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know our statistics of metabolic health. So, to say, for instance, if 75% of our population or adult population is metabolically unhealthy, right, that 75% is at risk of really poor outcomes with COVID. Does that make sense?
Oh. Yeah. And I guess that's what...
And so, it's very difficult for me to feel any anger at the government for doing what they're doing, because fundamentally they're trying to protect a very unwell population, and
that's a very good
to prevent a strain on the healthcare system. So, but if 75% of the population was metabolically healthy, I think you'll see a very, very different outcome, right? We'd be trying to protect at-risk groups. But my point is the general population's health is very problematic.
And as we actually there's so many people writing questions to ask, because we've got the opportunity to ask you a few. One of the ones that's staring at me right now, and I was like, I want to ask that one, is like, what theory or concept has been the most impactful on your being, on your in your work, or in your life, really, that you can sort of stand by? Is there any theory or quote or?
Yeah. Listen, there's probably many, but I can't get away from this concept of we're just another species of animal, a species of ape that kind of stood upright, and came down from the tree, lived a really brutish life, bottom fed for millions of years, scavenged for millions of years. And then we learned to farm, and then we learned to build civilizations. I'm really proud of that journey that we've taken, and I keep reiterating it. There's a lot of humility behind what I say, that we've come a long way, but because of how complex we are, right, in terms of this brain, this constant thirst that we can't quench, which is this thirst for power. I think every animal shows it. Like every animal wants to get to the top of that apex, wants to be the apex of their species. But you've got 8 billion of us, and I think we've got a few right at that apex, and I think they're destroying things for people. So when I look at this concept of obesity, diabetes, ill health, I look at it from the perspective of this is actually an economic issue, political and economic issue. And I've spoken before about the concept of crony capitalism, which is that you've got these really predatory businesses that are kind of just driving ill health. They're driving it in our kids and they're driving it in adults. And I call this big food. Now, big food and big pharma, well, they're all one and the same, really.
Yeah.
Because they both kind of don't really care. Well, I think it was Diane Rogers, who's the author of Sacred Cow. I mean, I think she said it best, or she might have requoted, where she said, you've got the food industry, which doesn't give a damn about health, and the health industry that doesn't give a damn about food. The two are fundamentally disconnected when they should be connected. So from my perspective, I just try and keep things as simple as possible. You know what I mean? And I kind of try and look at medicine from the light of evolution. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good, man. What about coffee?
Mate, I couldn't survive without coffee. I think it's definitely a stimulant. It'd be great to have coffee that's sourced properly, without it being heavily sprayed up. My understanding is it's a very heavily sprayed crop, sadly. But coffee in itself is just a stimulant. It's great pre-workout. I think where people stuff up coffee is, they just add calories to it. They just add liters, lots of milk, a lot of chocolate, a lot of sugar to it. It becomes a meal in itself. Do you know what I mean? Some of these coffees are like 250, 300 calories. But a black coffee is a 0-calorie drink and a great, stimulant, and it can be used socially. And we've been drinking it for God knows how many thousands of years. But again, it comes down to the chemical manipulation of it and the added calories, which we're doing for that palatability aspect of it. People tell me sometimes, coffee gives me gut issues, or coffee gives me gut problems. I say, well, what do you add to it? If you add in a couple of hundred, 150 mils of milk, which a lot of people that as they get older, their tolerance to the lactose, which is the sugar in milk, goes down. Obviously, because we're not babies. Gut stops making lactose. That might be the issue. It's what you're adding to it rather than coffee in itself.
Yeah, and sometimes I just think, like, if you get a headache without it, don't know, you know what I mean? Like, it's like if you're getting a headache without it, that means something to me. I don't sort of always need to study. It's like if I get a headache, I need a break. And sometimes I naturally feel like we just need a break because life, everything calms down with it. You know what I mean? And I do find it stops me eating. I can not eat for like 6 hours, and then and then I get fucking really hungry later. So it's exactly that. It's almost becoming a meal for people. And then if we're going into the concept of nutrient density, you just skipped out on some liver snags and some sauteed veggies or whatever instead of coffee and milk. Yeah. And that's like anything.
Well, the Native Americans, they call it empty fire. And I love that.
That's what they call it. Wow. Yeah. Okay, that's really cool.
So lately I've been going to the gym straight in the morning. I'll have coffee and then I'll go to the gym, and the results have been so good because I'm amped. I've got energy at the gym and I feel like I'm dispersing that energy instead of drinking a coffee and talking crap for an hour and getting all excited. And then I feel so it's been really interesting to try that. It's been really good.
Yeah. I saw a quote the other day. It was like borrowing energy from this afternoon. So that's a bit like that. It's a bit like that for me. Hey?
For sure.
Yeah. It's that's kind of my pre-workout as well. Just a long black or something like that prior to a workout, 0-calorie drink, and kind of sustains it really well. But in saying that, like, if you're having issues with sleep disturbances and things like that, you probably should look at kind of backing off the coffee or having a time frame in which you drink it. I think it'll be in the system for a few hours. So I see a lot of people drinking coffees late into the night and then, having shocking quality sleep, especially the deep sleep. So, I think it can be overused and it can be a problem then, but it's about knowing how to use it wisely, I think.
A question just came to me just as you were talking. It's not written down anyway. I was just thinking about it, and because I remembered the post you posted how male testosterone or sperm counts just dropping over the last 50 years or so, and I started thinking on that and thinking, well, is it coming nutritional? Is it coming because guys aren't really using their bodies anymore? Is it coming from a mental, emotional? Because you can almost feel like, you act in a certain way that's going to change the way. Like if you act in a small, rounded posture to make yourself look small, that, I don't know, but is that going to change testosterone? You know what I mean? Is not eating fat's going to change testosterone? Is just the feminization of the masculine going to change testosterone?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think this is a fascinating topic, guys, and I'm not professing to be an expert on it, but I think there is increased feminization of males whilst they're in utero. Okay. So as they're being carried, right? I think there is a external exposure to increase maternal estrogens, and I think a lot of that's coming from food. There's also the endocrine disruptors that are talked about, like plastics and stuff like that. I don't know if there's good enough evidence for it or conclusive evidence, but potentially that has a role as well. But if you're being excessively feminized whilst being carried in utero, I don't think it's your fault, really. It's, again, the environment working against you. So potentially, like the way you might come across when you've got low testosterone might be a reflection of the low testosterone than you pushing it down. So I think what I'm trying to say, it might not be intrinsic to that person. The environment kind of affects that. Additionally, we know that obesity and poor metabolic health will drive down testosterone, as will poor musculoskeletal health. So we've got three issues there. So we've got increased feminization as they're being carried. Secondly is the food environment. And thirdly is the sedentary lifestyle. So I think multiple factors are contributing to the low testosterone.
Yeah, I remember, I think Matthew Walker last said, if you're getting 6 hours sleep instead of 7 or 8, you have the testosterone for the next day anyway, 10 years to someone you're elder from sleep deprivation.
Yeah. And if you're sick, your survival hormones will override your sexual hormones.
Yes,
so it's like
absolutely.
So absolutely. Shut it down.
Absolutely. And a really good barometer for health for men, and I'm not ashamed to say it, is waking up with that with an erection or having an early morning erection. That's kind of when your testosterone is starting to spike. I think a lot of it's interesting. You ask the people that have declining metabolic health, and they'll lose that very, very early on in the piece. And but it's become the new norm. Whereas, you just lose that after your 20s.
20.
Yeah, but really, I think for us males, that should persist probably forever if things are optimized properly. But what the statistics are quite staggering. The average 20-year-old now has the same level of testosterone as a 67-year-old male from 20 years ago. We've got a real issue with our young boys, and I think testosterone has been previously linked to, or the connotations around it is that it's toxic, and at least in males that are violent and things like that. But the research doesn't kind of prove that. I think testosterone, when it's high, will lead to males having potentially some dominant behaviors, but it's very useful in the workforce because it drives, careers and occupations and so forth like that. You can see it in their behaviors, whereas lower testosterone is associated with probably more increased violence, definitely worse mental health. I don't think it's a great thing for males to have low testosterone. It's not a bad thing. It should be cherished.
Yeah, true.
Is there any correlation, I love your input on this, on the like for like principle. So say if someone's eating bull testicles, does that have is that the same precursors that would build the testosterone in those, or is there any correlation to that sort of thing?
No, listen, I mean, personally, I'm never eating testicles. And
I got capsules.
The testosterone's, and actually I lie. I mean, when we were growing up in Sri Lanka, I remember my grandmother used to make a curry. Like they'd get from their butchers and stuff, they'd get, the testicles. They used to make a curry. It was actually quite delicious. I look back, but I don't think I can convince my wife to help me
Yeah.
cook up bull testicles. But I don't think it really matters. I don't think it really matters. I think your body's got the capacity to take the substrates and make your own hormones. Every organ system comes with different amino acid profiles. So I guess you're getting a more complete amino acid profile if you're eating the entire animal. But I don't think it's critical. I don't think it's necessary. And I don't think we should overly complicate it for people, right? Like, I think we should just try and keep things as simple as possible, which is lots of muscle meat, some organ meat, and plenty of exercise.
That's so refreshing just to hear come out of your mouth, eh?
Yeah.
It's so good. Yeah.
And with the way you work with people, so what's like if you're with a client, because you obviously, you know, there's things that you're taught that you wouldn't want to really do, right? So when you're one-on-one with the client, how do you work you're using these basic principles as much as you can? You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. It's interesting. I mean, I've sort of fallen into this world of nutrition and lifestyle and so forth, but it kind of makes sense because as a gastroenterologist, and we're involved with the study of the gut and diseases of the gut, I was just seeing people with reflux, gut issues, inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, you name it. And I just thought to myself, like, a lot of this is what they're actually putting in the gut. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's just such a basic approach to it. So a lot of times that's what I'll bring forward with clients. You know, if they have persisting gut issues that they're presenting with, then we say, well, look, do you think it potentially is what you're putting in the gut? And a lot of people are open to work with that. And I've got a great dietetic team who work with us through my center. So we just take a bit of a multidisciplinary approach to it.
Yeah.
A lot of people are open to it. But then again, at the same time, a lot of people aren't, right? Like, they've got their fixed behaviors and they're not willing to change. But what we tend to do with the people that are willing to change, we say, look, maybe try this diet for your gut symptoms. But the amazing thing is it starts improving their metabolic health. Like, a lot of people can flick out of diabetes. And we've seen that happen multiple times in our practice. Do you know what I mean? Lose weight, improve their quality of life. So it really goes to show a lot of these diseases are just one and the same. Modern chronic illness, non-infective illness, is fundamentally just inflammation, just systemic whole body inflammation. And that's what I've come to the conclusion of as a gastroenterologist, that you've just got to look at things from a holistic perspective, one big body instead of separating it out into organ systems. I'm more than just a gut doctor. It's kind of my own take of myself. But I think that has to be the future of medicine moving forward.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, that's how we
that's
kind of
the
think
way I
as
look
well.
at the body.
Definitely.
For a rehab. I look at it as fascia, because like I'm getting big, and we're getting big into the fascia stuff at the moment. And you know, through the field in that, most of the time they've just laid the body down, cut it up lengthways, and just thrown out all that yellow shit that we now realize is part of the elasticity, the recall of the whole system. A really good one of my mentors, Matthew Walden, he's in London, but he speaks in the World Board of Physiotherapy there for disc bulges. But he really drills in this concept of evolution. Is like we are the apex predator because we can run in the transverse plane. You know what I mean? All these other animals run sagittal plane. We can run in a transverse plane from elasticity. So that's why we can outrun a horse over distance, you know, originally, which is amazing. You know what I mean? Like that's amazing to me. And that's the way I look at the body now, is just a bunch of slings and fascia. And I look at the tissue as if it's a living thing that needs to be hydrated and wet, and not something that's bone, tendon, muscle and cut off here. Cause that's the main, I feel like in the world of rehab, it's very, very much behind also, because it's, you know, most of my clients are people that have, you know, they're getting, if you look at the research in, say, an ACL injury, for them to do a study on ACL injuries, when this person could be eating fucking grains for breakfast, this person could be getting 4 hours sleep, this person's hips could be twisted to the left, this person's hips could be twisted to the right, quad dominant, this person's rib angle could be down. You know what I mean? It's very hard to look at it that study and take it for.
It's hard to isolate it.
It's hard to isolate instead of seeing what's in front of you. And I think that's
it's so similar to what you're saying about health in general, which is so cool, eh?
Yeah, it is. It really is fascinating stuff. But then the deeper you get into this and you go, well, if you're looking at it from a whole body perspective, then why is it that people kind of, even if you give them the knowledge, why is it that they won't move properly or eat properly? And then you start delving into psychology and the barriers behind it. So you just open up Pandora's box, really.
Yeah. You realize you're one person, hey, and you try
you're one person, and everyone's got different life experiences. Some people can have really negative life experiences, but then use that as a fuel, versus a lot of people that it becomes their ball and chain, basically. So it's like we're all really different, but it's not straightforward. It's not as simple as just eat a lot of meat and everything kind of corrects itself. It's like, well, you've got to re-educate people and look at it. So it's interesting though, because I explain everything from an evolutionary perspective. The barrier to that might be the person may not believe in the concept or the real signs of evolution. So it's like it really becomes challenging. It becomes challenging, and some days, I just say to myself, "Why do I do this?" Right? Like, it's just easy enough just to book the person in for a colonoscopy, get paid for a colonoscopy, and go home. But I'd be desperately unhappy practicing that way. And I think once you've kind of seen it, as you boys know, you can't unsee it, right?
Matrix, man. Yeah. Matrix.
Yeah, that's right. I love that.
And it's important that you speak your truth too. Like, I can see that's why we really took a shining to you, is because I can see you speaking your truth. And I think you posted something yesterday about the people that put out the fires, people that watch the fires, and people that are oblivious. And I see you as someone who's putting out the fires, which is telling the truth, even though it's uncomfortable and it's against a lot of things that people believe. And it's a fucking hard thing to do, eh?
Feeds your soul. Yeah.
It's a hard thing to do, but the more you do it, the easier it kind of becomes. And the 40s are a really sweet stage of your life. You boys probably got a little while to go. Look younger than me, but you just stop caring, really. What anyone else's opinion is. I know a lot of my colleagues have kind of followed my stuff and looked at my stuff and they probably kind of have some negative thoughts about what I'm doing, but the reality is I could care less. I just do what I think is right.
That's great.
And the world loves authenticity, like Wayne Dyer. People that are looking for approval never get it, and the people that aren't looking for the approval are the people that get approval. And people are really responding to your stuff, obviously, because how many people really follow doctors and that, you know what I mean? It's like, it's generally sort of the average person isn't going to follow that, but people are really responded to your page because it's authentic. And
thanks, mate. We've always got to be sort of cautious about what we post, because we've got a medical body that kind of watches over what we do, and social media is a new thing. But it was really striking to me yesterday I was posting something and I noticed a post come up from a cosmetic surgeon, essentially sort of, doing a cosmetic procedure. And I'm not kind of judging that, but I think to myself, like, what we're putting out is just so much deeper than the superficial stuff that's being put out. And it'd be a real pity if our body came down and said, well, doctors shouldn't communicate like this on social media, because I just see it as a powerful tool to kind of reach people. But it's who knows what the future holds.
Yeah, that's it, eh? I mean, it's only onwards and upwards wherever you go from now, I see, because like you got the following, you're speaking the truth, and even if you were by yourself, you'd be fine. It's like
what I'd love to touch on just near the end is is you mentioned the diaphragm and acid reflux, and I'm so fascinated by that, right? Because I'm wondering the mechanisms. Because what I've found with, say, ladies with incontinence is that if their pelvic floor's in front of their rib cage, if they're not stacked on each other, they're the ones that get that. The bladder doesn't have the pelvic floor to sit on. But if you can bring if you can bring someone's hips back in the midline through proper length tension assessment, then that sort of stuff goes away, even without the pelvic floor work, right? Because a lot of them, they go straight to the pelvic floor, but their postures, all their organs are just descending out of their abdominal wall because they're so anteriorly tilted or posteriorly tilted. So it's like, I'm wondering the mechanism behind that sort of oscillation of the diaphragm on the pelvic floor in relationship to acid reflux, because I love that shit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'll be right up your alley. But, like you could ask any upper GI surgeon, look at the diaphragm of someone who's 80 or 90, right? Versus young, fit guys like yourself. The diaphragm in fit people is a lot thicker versus those that are old. It's thinner. And the diaphragm's this muscle that pinches around your stomach fundamentally and helps you contain the acidic contents within the stomach. The stomach is acidic, whether you like it or not. That's part of our birthright, right? Like that's, you can't turn that off. You can with drugs, but that's not necessarily a good thing. The diaphragm's important to that. But I think for the diaphragm to be healthy, we've got to feed the muscle the right way. And, when you talk about modern people being under muscled, well, the diaphragm comes into that. One, it's because through nutrition, and two, I don't think we're breathing the way we're breathing. And this is why I'm such a big fan of like weights and deadlifts and squats and stuff like that. You're kind of really hitting that diaphragm every time. If you've got proper technique, you're bringing all of that into play. I don't particularly do any sort of isolated diaphragmatic breathing or anything like that, but I try and engage good form with the squats and deadlifts and with most weight training that I do, and it's super interesting. I think that allows for good diaphragmatic health. But you've got a lot of people now, sedentary jobs, they don't do weight training. Their idea of exercise is going for a 45-minute wander down the road with the dog. You're not going to engage your diaphragm doing that, and I'm sure you guys kind of agree with that, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We have like 90% of our clients are inverted breathing patterns.
Yeah,
so they're breathing into their chest, and their stomach draws in as they breathe, and it's just a stress response, respiratory response, isn't it? So,
yeah, it's a big, like if I have someone with scoliosis, it's probably one of the biggest things I address first, because for me to cue someone to get that pressure in the rib cage to push out and sort of straighten their spine is if they can't. Generally, if one side's caved in, they can't breathe into that side. So you can get them to breathe into that right rib cage or right diaphragm, whichever side it was, and you can see it. That's what cues them into the position. So then when you run tension to the spine during whatever, a million things, if they can get that breath right, then it can sort of start to step one in unwinding, a functional scoliosis, which is it works really well. I had a girl recently, it worked really well for her.
Yeah, it's amazing, eh?
It's fascinating, isn't it, guys? Like we've forgotten how to breathe, we've forgotten how to eat, we've forgotten how to exercise. Is the modern world, and and as we do this, as we keep forgetting, we've just got these industries coming in and just giving us, like, even take Facebook's new virtual reality world. Like, as people are kind of losing all these aspects, you've just got these predatory vultures just circling above us and go, well, here's a business idea, bang. And we just take these ideas on board. We just consume these ideas. Whereas if we were to simplify, reconnect with nature, eat the way we're supposed to, it's the way to do it. It's just such a simple, practical, pragmatic way to think, but we'll be unusual moving forward. Populations like us will become a tribe moving forward against a larger tribe that is more open to just embrace this concept of consumerism.
Yeah, well, the world's changing, and you're part of it, we're part of it, and that's our goal. Eventually, is to start, like, corrective culture is just a name at the start, but now we actually want to turn into a bit of a culture, have a gym one day, and teach people this way of thinking. Like, choices for the world. Get your compost bin, choose good quality meat, because it changes with our money. It's not so much even the post. It's where do you spend your money, and that's how we'll change the world.
Absolutely. And you got to empower people to do that, but we'll see how it all goes. I think the odds are stacked against what we're trying to do, but there will be a few that you will keep pulling out, from the matrix, and there's that concept of the city of Zion and the matrix. It's a lot of biblical themes around that, but that's kind of the city where the enlightened go. Hopefully we could just draw in as many people as we can into that state of enlightenment, but the state of enlightenment is not a comfortable place, right? It's a very uncomfortable place to be.
You got to think for yourself, eh?
Yeah, that's right. It's an uncomfortable place to be for a lot of people, and people love comfort, mate. you know, and we're a lazy species by nature, right? You know, even hunter-gatherers, if you give them enough food and water, they won't hunt, you know, but I think there are few amongst us that know how important that is, and they keep pushing towards that target, but we're all different. Yeah,
For sure. So who are you really inspired by at the moment? Like, do you know about Paul Chek? Have you ever heard of Paul Chek?
no, I haven't actually.
He's pretty awesome, man. You remind me of him actually. He's kind of our mentor who started the Chek Institute and who we've studied through body biomechanics, and it goes into a very holistic. But who are you really like amped about at the moment? Like Jordan Peterson comes to mind, or like do you listen to him?
Yeah, Jordan Peterson's phenomenal, and his daughter Michaela, who I know, is also great. Jordan's great. He's a very, very tortured soul. He's a very empathetic sort of a man. He's seen and he's very enlightened, but he will confess like part of that enlightenments come with his pain. You know, suffered debilitating depression, and Jordan is someone that I definitely love his work. But I tend to have a lot of conversation with myself with just using ancient kind of knowledge, and I love reading old school philosophy and looking at old school art. And the people that I think we should be inspired by is ourselves. I think we should really engage in this conversation with ourselves, right? Some of us do it in the shower. It's the only time we get to spend to ourselves where we're constantly talking, but to your own self or mind. But I think we should be doing it more over the course of the day. It's just this constant conversation with yourself and just looking to improve ourselves. But yeah, I've got a few kind of people that I look to and look up to in the space, and Jordan Peterson will be one of them. There's some really good guys as well. You know, Dr. Sean Baker is the orthopedic surgeon in America. He's brilliant. You know, a very brave guy as well. But yeah, there's a few of them. Yeah,
I've seen you getting into Carl Jung. I've seen you post a lot of Carl Jung stuff.
Yeah, he was the father of modern psychology or psychology. He was actually a psychiatrist, so he's a doctor.
Yeah.
But just had a profound and almost scary understanding of the human psyche. You know, probably one of the best to have ever done it. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in what he says.
Yeah.
And I think the more of his stuff you read, the more you start really engaging yourself. I mean, we talked about engaging the core and the diaphragm and stuff, but you've got to really start engaging your own shadow, your own mind. And these are a lot of the concepts that Carl Jung talked about. And I think a lot of Jordan Peterson's stuff is based on Carl Jung's writings. Yeah,
it's what in the Chek system, it was really drilled in to find what archetype are you playing and what archetype is your clients playing, because we see the victim come in. I saw a child come in a couple of days ago. You know, you see these archetypes come in, and then when you look at it through those eyes, because you see it in yourself too. You know I can drop it in my child. That's my one. But when you witness it, then you won't act on it. So some people will judge themselves just for thinking it. But now if I can witness my child archetype come up, say I feel victimized or something, then it doesn't become part of my reality because I don't act upon it. And I think that's been gold for me. And I try and give it to clients as a taste, but you see a lot of mother archetypes come in, you see father archetypes, you see these people that are just playing a character and they don't even know it,
Yes, absolutely.
We got one question that is just to end on, and this is biggest piece of advice for the average person to take home today if you were gonna. It's a hard question, I know, right? I wouldn't even know what to answer if you asked me that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Biggest word of advice, I think the human body is a amazing bit of kit, and once you nourish it the right way, and that's not necessarily just through nutrition, I'm talking through sleep and self-care and nature and so on. Once you nourish it the right way, intuitively it will do some amazing things. It'll do some wondrous things for you. So I think that would be my take-home message. It's just learn to kind of really nourish yourself instead of kind of punishing yourself all the time. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing. They're punishing and then seeking out a quick hit of something, whether it's food or pornography or whatever it is. It's everything in life has become about quick fixes and quick hits. We're all addicted to something. It's just, what are you addicted to, right? So make sure your addictions are the right ones. Addicted to eating well, addicted to sleeping well, addicted to exercising, addicted to improving yourself. I think those sort of addictions become very healthy and self-fulfilling long term.
Definitely.
That's
man.
awesome. And how do you spiritually nourish yourself through? Do you meditate? Do you?
I should. I probably have some people would describe it ADHD, but my thought processes are everywhere. And the only time I can genuinely collect it all together is when I'm in the gym doing training. That's my meditation.
That is a meditation, hey.
Yeah,
that's active meditation.
That's it. And the rest of the time, my thoughts are everywhere. Look, I've had my struggles through school and university because of that method of thinking, but that is also probably my greatest gift because it allows me to kind of achieve a lot of things at once.
For
right?
sure,
It drives my wife crazy, but she understands. So I think you've just got to find your place. So I get it generally through nature or through the gym, and I recognize it and I make sure that I strive to achieve it,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's gold, man. So if you ever come to the Sunshine Coast, we'll have to do a workout for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Listen, I'll probably struggle to keep up with you guys.
I doubt it.
Yeah, once things are over, here with the restrictions eased and so forth, and once you Queenslanders start letting us in, make the way up.
Yeah, we got it sorted. We'll chuck the tools
We'll definitely keep in touch and have a coffee or a workout in the future. But really appreciate your time today, man.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Thank you, fellas. A really great line of questioning, and looking forward to doing it again sometime.
Dude, for sure.
Man,
Fuck
there's about 40 more questions here for you next time, so I'll save them for next time. We'll go for hours. But cool. And for people, Dr. Pran on Instagram,
Dr.
type it in.
Yoganathan,
Yeah, and it'll pop up when you type in Dr. P.
Yep.
And give him a follow because it's my. And where do you come up with the memes from? One last question. It's so good.
It's probably my only skill in life, mate. No, I just find these funny pictures, and I think to myself, how funny would it be if I added some text to it? And it just comes. And I'm inspired by the world, mate. Like you look around and there's a lot of sadness, but in that sadness, there's a lot of funny there as well. You've got to laugh at it. So that's where it all comes from.
Yeah, awesome, man. All right, well, much love, brother.
Much love.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Appreciate it again.
Thanks, fellas. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, mate.
Legend.
See ya.